see that is now in progress. Okay. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here this evening. I appreciate your patience as we've had just a little bit of technical difficulty getting started here, but we've got a lot of great folks from Metro Stormwater Division, and they've got a lot of slides to share. So we're just kind of getting that all worked out. It looks like we have over 30 folks from the community joining us this evening, again, along with a lot of Metro Water staff and Cumberland River Compact and the city of Mead. There's our agenda. It's sideways, but okay. Thank you, Ms. Hayes. I'm Councilwoman Angie Henderson. I probably have met and spoken with many of you and certainly received emails from you, often with stormwater concerns. And so the hope of this meeting is really to aggregate and compile those concerns. I have shared them with the water department, with our stormwater division, and asked them to share about their department, the work that they do, and how that's kind of particular to this watershed. So what we're going to ask, just as far as the run of the meeting, to start for the presentation time, anyone who is presenting as a panelist or sharing slides, if you will please turn your video on so that the community can see you. And then community members, as the presentation goes along, I would encourage you to enter questions into the chat, or if you want to wait till that time concludes, if your questions were not answered, then I think Ms. Hayes, I can see further down the agenda. We'll have Metro Stormwater for the largest chunk, City of Mead for brief remarks, Cumberland River Compact, and then time for questions and answers at the end. I'm asking everyone to put their questions into the chat, please. That way, if we do not get to all of them, then we will be accountable to you for responding later, and we can compile those questions. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Metro Stormwater. Thank you.
Michael, will you share the presentation since I do not have it, since as Ricky was, I'll let you advance for me.
Done.
So good evening. I am Sonia Ullman with Metro Water Services, and I will be filling in for Ricky Swift. I am the Manager of Strategic Communications, but do have a background in stormwater. So we will begin this presentation. So Metro Water Services actually handles water, wastewater, stormwater, and now waste services. So we consider ourselves a one water, one environment, one community utility. So the question is, what is stormwater? Stormwater is essentially rainwater that comes down, hits the ground, and then runs through what we call a watershed. Some of that water clearly filters into the ground. Some of the water travels across the ground, but all of that water is trying to get into the lowest point, which is our creeks, streams, and make its way down to our river and lakes. So Nashville has a lot of watersheds. We have 2,478 stream miles in Davidson County. So we are very fortunate to have a lot of water. A lot of water also can lead to a lot of flooding and a lot of development issues. You see where that star is, that is your watershed. You are right on the edge of the Richland and Harpeth watershed. So I assume most of you, if not all of you, are in the Richland watershed. But this map actually shows all of the various watersheds in Nashville. And a watershed is really an area of water that is a drainage basin. So when a water hits when a drop of water hits the ground, depending on where it hits, for instance, if it hits on the top of a hillside or a mountain, it's going to drain down one side or the other. Where that drainage basin is called a watershed. So this is the area, and Michael, you may need to help me out because I am not sure what this slide is showing.
I saw Matt Tays was on. He works for Ricky. Matt, are you able to come on and share anything about this slide?
Yeah, this is Mac. Y'all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so this is one that Sonia, that Ricky wanted to possibly show that we mentioned as far as this is just a big picture view of the delineated area for the watershed, for the area that covers Nichol Ln and Page Road and in all those areas that drain down to Tyne Boulevard. So don't know how much detail we want to go into this right now. We could always come back to it later, I suppose. But this is just kind of give everybody kind of a big picture view of what the delineated areas are that drain specifically to, what comes off the park, what comes off, areas west of Page Road and those areas that kind of drain through the Nichol Ln, that area between Nichol Ln and Page Road.
Thank you. So again, I'm assuming this is showing that drainage area. So you can see that it's a relatively large drainage basin right there in that area. Matt, do you have anything to add?
No, this is one.
We can hear you, Mr. Tays, but we need a little more volume from you, a little more volume and clarity when you speak, please.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, so this is one, Michael, I think you actually generated. This is basically kind of the larger total drainage basin that drains there toward Tyne Boulevard and drains to the creek. And basically, it's a half square mile drainage area that drains through that area.
So when we talk about stormwater, we clearly have a lot of stormwater infrastructure. Nashville is the 4th largest municipal separate storm sewer system, which is an MS4. And that is really all of the ditches and conveyances and pertinences that carry stormwater. We cover 526 square miles, have a population of over 659,000 with 11,000 outfalls. So when you look at the various stormwater components, we have over 56,000 inlets, 3,800 miles of pipes, culverts, channels, and on our stormwater control measures, that's 6,100 structures. So we have a lot of infrastructure that has to be maintained, repaired, upgraded, and maintenance on stormwater is never a one and done process. As you know, especially in the fall, we have a lot of storm drains, some of those 56,000 inlets that are continually being clogged with leaves and debris. Anything that is thrown out a car window or falls off of a tree or is pushed down by stormwater often lands on top of those storm drains and causes clogging. It causes it to clog. Those blocked storm drains can lead to flash flooding and especially roadway flooding. So we have crews that are always going out and cleaning this infrastructure and maintaining this infrastructure. So when I say maintenance, it's something that we can do one day and then we're back out there the very next day doing it again. Next slide, Michael.
Sonia, if I might clarify one thing for the folks.
Absolutely.
Outfall relates to where our metro-owned storm sewer system discharges to a stream. And I'll get into later the regulatory significance of that, but maybe for those who didn't understand what outfall is, we have 11,000 points within metro where our system discharges into a stream.
And Ms. Allman, if I can, in the maintenance area, you were mentioning stormwater inlets, of which we have a few in the vicinity of Page Road, but we are, primarily suburban context. And so a lot of our difficulty, especially in the Page Road corridor neighbors, and I would encourage you all, please don't put your paper bagged leaves and your debris in the ditches. a lot of the, the stormwater coming over the road on Page Road, flowing onto the creek, is getting caught against people's own driveway culverts. And so I wonder if you can speak to that. I know, when we're having an event, folks can call 311, they can go to our hub.nashville.gov. But, if you could kind of speak to in the maintenance space, kind of the orders of magnitude, right? Like if you have a small obstruction against your own personal driveway culvert, the city and I would ask, right, that you remove that obstruction, that you be mindful of that and try to do that yourself. Obviously, if there's something in a stormwater conveyance that's of a higher order of magnitude, that's something that you all are going to come out to. Could you give us just a little clarity in the maintenance area where you're speaking to at the
Sure.
top?
Absolutely. And that ties in perfectly because maintenance is our top stormwater section here. And they restore function to the existing system. So again, they're doing repairs, they're cleaning, they're stabilizing, they're doing ditch maintenance, masonry work, and they do clean and vacuum stormwater structures. And when they vacuum these, they're actually using a very large vac truck that has high pressure water that pushes the water in and then it vacuums it out. So it stops any type of clogs and blockages. But very often those clogs and blockages can be avoided just by simple maintenance from the homeowner. Very often people want to put grass clippings into their ditch or waiting for brush collection, they put it too close to the ditch. And when it rains, all of that debris is washed into the ditch and clearly through the culverts that go under everyone's driveways. Those culverts are very often a pinch point because they're often a little bit smaller than the ditch. And over time, as sediment and debris begin to fill in the ditch and those culverts as well, sometimes they can even become much smaller. We've seen many culverts that are, supposed to be round, but now they look a little bit more like a moon shape because they've had so much sediment and stuff filled into them. And when that water pushes your leaves and debris further downstream, it then often picks up your neighbor's leaves and debris and pushes it downstream until it gets to a point where it can no longer go downstream. And that's when it causes a blockage, water begins to back up and then can go over a road causing a hazard. So we do ask that when you're putting stuff out for brush collection, that you make sure you put it in front of or behind the ditch at a safe distance, that you not put any type of grass clippings or leaves into your ditch or your storm drain. And that if you do see a blockage occurring or sticks or something have gotten up against your driveway culvert, it's very often just simple enough to just reach down there, pick it up, put it in with your paper bag that you put out for debris collection or in your brush pile. And that can save you and or your neighbors flooding issues in the future. So even as far as storm drains, and I know you don't have as many storm drains out there, sometimes it's just as simple as sweeping off a storm drain or picking up a plastic bag or styrofoam cup that someone threw out. I know it's often not your trash, it's someone else's trash. And I think our stormwater crews sometimes feel the same way, especially with the littering that unfortunately occurs so often. So that is maintenance, again, with as many pieces of infrastructure that we have to maintain. It's very difficult for our crews to be everywhere at once. And one simple crane can wash debris down and cause flooding issues. So anytime we can get assistance from the community, we truly appreciate it. So that is our maintenance section. Our stormwater also has a capital project section. This section does all of the big capital construction projects. So they are actually replacing segments or actually building or improving segments rather than just doing the maintenance. We have a watershed protection, that's Npds. Michael Hunt will talk more about that here in a little bit. And we also have urban forestry. Trees are a huge part of stormwater maintenance. Trees absorb water, they improve our air. So we really want to, plant, maintain, care for our urban forests and help mitigate some of that stormwater runoff and improve our canopy. It improves the creek, it maintains the temperature in the creek. So trees are always a really good thing.
Hey, Sonia, this is Ricky. I was able to get on now, finally.
Oh, well, I will hand it over to Ricky then,
Just
just
in
in time
time.
for him to talk about stormwater maintenance, which is his section.
Welcome, Mr. Swift.
Okay.
Thank you.
My apologies. I had some technical difficulties. Okay, stormwater maintenance. It restores the function of the existing system through cleaning and stabilizing without major construction. And there in the images there, you can see just some examples, some ditch work our crews have done. And next, stormwater program efforts. So these are things our program has been able to achieve. We've been around since 2002. As far as our capital program, that funding did not come around to 2010. But through the years, for Davidson County, we have received a total of 40,300 service requests. So these are calls that come in from residents about various issues. We go out and investigate each one. Sometimes someone has an issue that they think is a stormwater issue, but it really should go to another department. But we'll go out anyway, take a look just to make sure. And then we kind of broker, make sure that it gets to the right group. If it is ours, we go through our process of evaluating it, determine the severity of it, the best way to approach it. From those 40,300 service requests, there was generated 37,200 work orders. Now this is work that was performed by stormwater maintenance crews. We have 9 crews that go out every day. They're out every day doing work in every district, cleaning out ditch lines, cleaning out pipes, replacing driveway pipes, redigging ditches, just addressing various drainage issues across the county. As far as our capital program, which I just mentioned to date, we have $161,200,000 worth of capital projects have been completed by our program to date. Okay, next. Next.
Ricky, I'm on the slide showing District 34 with the service requests.
And neighbors, this is our neighborhood up over here, the triangle. This is the Mead Highlands. So specific to our area, you can see the multiple service requests and some of the completed work orders. So hopefully Mr. Swift is going to segue now to speaking very specifically about our area and those that maintenance work and those in progress work orders. We're here in this.
Okay. My screen is still showing the stormwater maintenance screen. It hasn't moved yet. So look like my technical difficulties are continuing. I'm not, the slide that Mike has moved to is not showing up on my computer. But hold on, give me 2 seconds. Hold on, I've got a hard copy. Hold on.
It's slide 10, Ricky, if that helps.
It do. Okay, all right, again, all right, here we go. So what this is showing, this is part of our annual report. Every year we have to demonstrate to the council our efforts and things that we've done for Council District 34. As you can see, this is our routine request that came in that resulted in things that fell to our crews. And you see the biggest concentration of them are actually up there, butted up against like Abbott Marne and the Harding Place area. Part of the district.
Swift, if you'll recall, everybody in this meeting is from Nichol Ln and Page Road. So I appreciate everybody seeing the larger context, but if you could just speak specifically to what's happening on their street and in our neighborhood, please.
Okay, my apologies. I thought this was a larger group we were talking to. Okay, well, hey, so if you move on to the next slide, Michael.
Okay, I'm on 11 now.
Okay, on that slide, it goes through and it shows you some of the addresses. You go down about 8, you see 314 Page Road, and several, but this is a mix of everything that's in Council District 34. And then the following slide, all that continues. And this is just everything that's come in during this time frame for this report that we sent to the council. The next slide, similar, but these are service requests kind of result of things of a remedial nature. These are things our crews could not address. And these are things that go into our pipeline to be evaluated as a capital project. If you go to the next slide, you'll see about 5 down, 1223 Nichol Ln and 103 Page Road. As far as some of the locations there, that's kind of concentrated location of the council lady mention there. Okay.
Mr. Swift, do you have per my request a summary of all the service requests recently in this area over the last few years, or what's in progress, or can you share with neighbors what? I know you've been out cleaning out ditches and sizing them and doing some specific culvert projects. Is that among your slides?
Give me 1 second, please. Okay, no, that's not one of the slides, but I do have that information here regarding currently everything that's open, the open service request in District 34, which right now is a total of about 36 or so open service requests, and these are things ranging from needing to get ditches cleaned out, clogged culverts, sinkholes. It's just kind of a hodgepodge of everything that are still open there in the district.
Okay, but again, for Nichol Lane and Page Road, please.
Okay. Hey, Michael, if you would go back to the previous slides, the one with remedial maintenance service request, that one, those are the ones from the annual report, and these are all the locations. And I'll just read through them all because it's a hodgepodge of everything. You got 4,000 Wallace Lane, 4629 Chalmers, 2400.
Mr. Swift, please, sir, apologize. Those are not in this neighborhood. So if we could just moving on, then please. And you know, I was just hoping you could speak to, as I had asked, to share with neighbors, please, what has been done on Nichol Lane of late, what service requests are open, what is in progress. You all have been out repurposing or reshaping some of the ditches out there. I believe we have some open service requests for the same. I was just hoping that you could speak to that. If you're not able, I think we just kind of keep moving on.
Oh, yeah, we'll move on. My apologies on that from previous discussions. I understand what this is for the larger district, but I can pull those out and send that information to you, though. Okay. Mike, I think the next slide is what Metro can do.
I'm there.
Okay. What Metro can do, investigate and document customer issues to see if there are stormwater problems and work to get them solved as quick as possible. Clear culverts, dig out ditches, remove debris and down trees so that streams flow freely. We cannot deepen or widen creeks. This does not solve flooding issues in the floodplain. The next slide is what homeowners can do to reduce runoff, redirect the downspouts so they're not directed directly towards your houses, but away from them. Plant rain gardens in those low-lying areas you have on your properties. Install rain barrels to capture runoff coming off from your roofs and other areas. Plant trees. Planting trees do a lot to absorb runoff stormwater once it perks into the ground. Clean up storm draining grates. You go outside and you see a inlet out in the street that's covered up with leaves or debris. Go out, knock it off, and that will help out a lot. Or you can just call our department and we'll come out and we'll do that as well. Okay. To protect your property, elevate or relocate service equipment such as HVAC or electrical equipment. Install a sump pump, install flood barriers, and get flood insurance. That's very important if your home is in a place that sees continuous flooding and receives continuous damage. Stormwater manages flooding of the public right away for the safety of everyone, but not just private property. Okay, the next slide is how do we determine projects?
I'm there.
We have investigators to go out and meet with homeowners or property owners when there are issues. Those investigations are evaluated by one of our engineers to determine the severity of it, the best way to approach if it's something that can be handled by our crew, so it needs to be part of a larger project, be part of a capital project. Maintenance prioritized based on that severity. The actual design for those projects, we have several firms under contract. They take those areas, go into evaluations, determine the larger picture, and then down to the details of what size pipes to be installed, where ditches need to go. There needs to be the installation of a whole new drainage system. If there's blockages that may be impairing the system at some point or another. To evaluate all that, come up with our construction plans. And we have an annual contractor that we utilize to help go out and knock out these projects for us. And that's when it actually gets to the construction phase. And at this point, the discussion will go to Npds.
All right, my name is Michael Hunt. I'm manager of the Npds group, actually better known as Stormwater Quality. I'm going to be brief because a lot of what we do relates to non-residential areas, but there are a few aspects that I thought folks might want to be aware of, and I'm going to have a summary page here in just a second to give you more contact information if you want more information after tonight. We're made up of a group of 5 eclectic activities relating to the watershed and how we can improve stormwater quality. One of the things as it relates to residential neighborhoods is the public education aspect. It's already been referred to. We're a participant in the Tennessee Smart Yards program. That's just one example of the types of services that we can provide the public. And at the end, I'll have a link to our public education page if anyone wants more information. As has also been mentioned, the Urban Forestry Initiative as it relates to stormwater is within our group. Metro is somewhat unique across the country in that we have nested urban forestry coordination within stormwater. Trees are a tremendous stormwater management tool. A forested area, generally speaking, over the course of a year will serve to infiltrate about 95% of the annual rainfall. So they are very valuable tools. They also provide some intangible benefits as well, social benefits, heat island effect benefits, things like that. So we're initiating several activities to try to benefit Metro's tree canopy. And I know Council Member Henderson has been a strong advocate of those activities for Metro in that regard. This is a brief summary of what all our office does. We are sort of the regulatory arm of Metro Water Services Stormwater. For sites that get grading permits as a part of their development activity, we have inspectors that are routinely visiting those sites to make sure that they are being built per plan and that their erosion prevention and sediment controls are in place so they won't lose sediment. Just to give you an idea of the scope of that right now, we have over 900 active permits. In any given year, we do over 8,000 inspections of those sites, and we do various enforcements when they're not doing what they need to do, to include stop work orders. We do have, I mentioned earlier, outfalls. There is a regulatory obligation for Metro from EPA and TDEC at the state regarding the need for Metro to oversee the watersheds such that those outfalls are not discharging pollutants to the waters of the state, to the streams. That involves us with industrial sites, commercial activities, anything within the community that might serve to put pollutants in the storm sewer system. Stormwater is very interesting in that a lot of utilities are within closed conduits, so the realm isn't as large. But for stormwater, obviously there are thousands and thousands of acres of private property that route to our system. So we're involved with a lot of different things as it relates to that permit and making sure even Metro's activities aren't creating stormwater issues. The third part of our program is what we refer to as a watershed group. We have a group of staff who are out routinely in streams doing sampling work, keeping an eye on streams, making sure that the parameters are within acceptable ranges. This includes stream walks where they actually get in the streams and they walk. I think to date we've walked about 142 miles of stream. I have mentioned the urban forestry effort already, but Rebecca Doan in our group is our stormwater sustainability manager. She works with our urban forestry efforts, our stormwater low impact development promotion and activity, and also is involved with our regulations as if needed. Finally, a few years ago, you may not know this, but kind of closing out the stormwater interest within Metro, the Davidson County Soil Conservation District was moved into stormwater within our group. There are a lot of ag activities within Metro, and this group does a fantastic job connecting farmers with resources to help the conservation of soil and water on their farm. So as you can see, we have several varied activities that we do. I mentioned the pollution prevention. This is the link. If you just Google pollution prevention in Metro Nashville, you'll get there. If you have any future questions about what we do, you can call the 615-313 Pure number, or anytime you can email us at stormwaterquality@nashville.gov. If you have any programmatic questions, feel free to email me. My email is michael.hunt@nashville.gov. With that, as I prepare to turn it back over to Ricky, who's going to talk a little bit about Metro Water Stormwater's oversight of development activities, I thought you might find it interesting, because one of the things when you talk about development is what does the area in question look like over time as it relates to development. And Council Member Henderson, I think this is the area that you're speaking of tonight, that most of the residents are here. So I went out and I created a map that showed this is 2000 and this is 2020. So you can see, obviously the 2000 was black and white. We have much better digital orthos now, but you can see there has been some development. Obviously, single family residential is a little bit different than what we see in some areas, but I did want to let you see kind of how your area has changed over the last 20 years. And I thought that would be a good prelude as Ricky gets into how Metro Water regulates development. Sometimes it I think isn't clear all the regulations that we put on development as it relates to stormwater. It's a very intricate process involved, and at this time Ricky is going to give a little bit of an update or an overview on that. Ricky?
Okay, so just run through this, our development services section. This covers everything from permits, availability, technical review, infill and field activities. All right, compliant regulations. This group ensures that all the requirements for the water lines, the water system, sewer system, stormwater, make sure all those things meet state, local, and federal regulations. Our planning group, zoning group, and legal group are all part of the whole process. All right, stormwater regulations, just a little background on the history of stormwater a little bit. Stormwater regulations did not really kick into 1979. Prior to 1979, I say there were no regulations. As far as we talk a lot about floodplain and floodway, those really weren't mapped out until after 1982. So prior to 1982, anyone could go, you could build a house right next to a creek and someone say something about a floodplain. You go, well, what's that? Because, you know, it really had not been defined yet. But they went through a process of studying and evaluating various rivers, streams, and determined based on different rain events, 10-year, 50, 100, 500 event rain events, and they were able to determine just how far out the banks of a river the water would come. And with that information, they would determine the zones where building houses, you know, that's what you said, particularly in the floodway, where you cannot build today, whereas years ago you could. But using that process kind of helps determine where houses go, and that has been a huge help. So we know after 2010, houses that were built too close to creeks and streams, or the finished soil elevations were too low, I really felt that after that, the requirements for houses to be elevated higher and to not be built within those zones has really helped, save property and save lives. You know, because imagine next time we have an event like that, where some of those houses were, there won't be any, and there won't be people that will have to be rescued. So next. The approval process, this just kind of goes through the initial approval, when you have a subdivision or development going to do, you come in with your engineering plans. You pay the fees to go through the process. Participation in maintenance agreements. There's a detention pond of water quality devices that be part of the development. And once you go through the process of getting everything reviewed and you meet all of the regulations, then you're approved to start your construction. Next. Okay, this graph right here is just a quick and dirty look at, everyone knows that, Nashville is growing. There's always construction going on. And you look starting at 2011, each year, just the increase of development that has taken place here within Davidson County. So definitely on the upswing here.
And I would note, Ricky, on this slide, I'm not sure what the year to date was on that, but I have a feeling that was much earlier this year. We're on track to, again, this year set records for development. We're at an all-time record high of grading permits. I mentioned we're at 904. And then I know our single family stormwater, we have well over 1,000 of those permits that we're monitoring right now.
Okay. All right. This last couple of slides is talking about additional resources. Npds, that's where you see about any metro projects that's taking place across the city. To see the annual project reports, there's a link there in the nashville.gov to the projects being done by Metro Water Services. And the next slide has links for just the website to stormwater, any flooding emergency, 615-862-4494, water quality issues, 615-313-PURE.
And I would just add as a postscript onto that we really would direct people to go to and use Hub Nashville. That process is well established at this point and fairly easy to use, and it gives you an automatic update on your concern once we enter in our findings and resolutions. So in addition to these resources, would again encourage you to use the Hub Nashville resource that Metro provides to the community.
And this is Sonia, and clearly when I wrote this slide, I don't know what I was thinking, because the flooding and emergency number is 862-4600. 862-4494 is actually my office
That's your number.
So please do not call me in an emergency. But 862-4600 is our customer service and dispatch, and that is manned 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, including holidays. So 862-4600 is that number you would call.
Thank you, Ms. Allman, and thank you, Mr. Swift and Mr. Hunt. I guess, as Mr. Swift was speaking most recently about our regulations particular to new home development and infill development, I think when we get in the question and answer stage, we'll kind of come back to some of the things that come along with new homes, fences, and so forth, and some of the best practices around that. But as Mr. Swift was speaking to our process, Nichol Ln neighbors across the street from you, you have the city of Mead, and several representatives from the city of Mead are here this evening, and they wanted to share briefly how they work with stormwater. They were very kind to meet out on Nichol Ln with me back in October. Your neighbor, Ms. Nielsen, compiled, subsequent to our last kind of acute rain event, kind of a collection of problems as people saw them. And so I was able to share that also with the city of Mead. And so with that, Ms. Reardon, city manager, and I would turn it over to you if you would like to share anything from the city of Mead's perspective, please.
Thank you, Angie. Our codes official and also the one that handles the residential stormwater issues, Lyle Patterson, is here, and he's got a statement to read that was crafted with our our consultant that does our stormwater reviews for all residential properties. His name is Lyle Patterson. I'll hand it over to him, and he can
Yes, thank
answer
you.
any questions you might have about all of the streets that border between Mead and Metro. Thanks.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Mr. Patterson. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So basically, the city of Mead requirements for stormwater, some of the things we address are in order to help the stormwater situation within Mead, post-development peak flows that must be less than or equal to pre-developed peak flows for the 2 through 100-year 24-hour design storm event. Additionally, for land disturbance between 10,000 square feet and 0.99 of an acre, at least one non-structural stormwater quality improvement, such as a disconnected roof drain, is required. That would allow sheet flow across a yard. And for 1 acre or more, the first 1 inch of runoff must be captured and reused or infiltrated. An example of that would be by the use of underground detention system. So the stormwater in Mead, we're pretty much built out, but people are tearing down homes. And what would trigger a stormwater plan, a full plan, would be for a new home, large addition, swimming pools. We have a lot of swimming pools people put in. That's a full stormwater plan. Close to a blue line stream or at the building official's discretion, geothermal, anything like that. So that's pretty much it. That's kind of sums it up.
I appreciate that, Mr. Patterson. And as you know, neighbors, as we were out on the street, I think while those of you who reside to the west are in Metro's USD, and those of you who reside to the east are within the city of Mead, the entire roadway and kind of the right-of-way ditch line on both sides of the road is within the purview of Metro from a maintenance standpoint. And so, you know, while Metro's infill development standards and Mead's may vary slightly, generally the spirit of it is that you do not want to have, too much more additional impervious area. And if you do, it's very important to make sure that you are not displacing that water onto your neighbors and to their detriment. So, Mr. Patterson, anything else to share, just kind of in line with some of the concerns that you know on the street? Anything particular to Nichol Ln to bring to our attention?
It seems like we have a lot of runoff coming from the Percy Warner Golf Course area, and a lot of the culverts on the driveway are clogged up. It's probably the biggest contributor to the flooding on that street, along with maybe the Metro Park, the new entrance that was put in. Seems like we have a lot more water flow coming from that hitting the head of Nichol.
Well, I appreciate that, and that is a good segue to our next guest and presenter, Ms. Nichol Ln, who is the Executive Director of the Cumberland River Compact. And she's going to speak to some of these watershed issues and the opportunity that we may have, which I think I've shared with some neighbors. While can't mitigate all the stormwater on our Metro golf course, we do anticipate a renovation to the golf course, and so I have asked the Metro partners and the design team and folks that are working on that to make sure that stormwater is a part of the design, that we're doing what we can to mitigate stormwater at that location. And so with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Houghton, please. Welcome, Nichol.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. For the purposes of the conversation tonight, the Cumberland River Compact works in most of the runoff reduction categories that were in Metro Water slide. So rain gardens, trees, rain barrels, spongy landscapes. The None of that is, from what I understand, you all are experiencing, flooding issues and pretty severe stormwater runoff issues. So, planting a rain garden in your front yard, as much as I would love to see you do that, is not going to solve your flooding problems. So I want to speak to the quantity of stormwater that you're seeing coming down. The top of your drainage area is the golf course. As you all know, that provides a lot of opportunity for your neighborhood. And I spoke with Friends of Warner Park today, with Jenny Hannon today, about the redevelopment of the golf course, and let her know that as many trees as they can incorporate into that redesign, we want to be a partner in providing those trees. So they're starting tomorrow to kind of lay that out, but she knows that, that flooding is an issue, and that they are the top of the watershed, and that they have many partners to make sure that that top of that watershed is loaded with trees. So you've heard a lot of people talk about trees and how effective they are, and really our goal would be to get as many trees as we can into that property to help reduce your flooding.
Ms. Houghton, can you speak to, I know when we were preparing for this call, I can't recall if it was you or some other Metro colleagues on the call, but when we were talking about, perhaps it was Mr. Hunt, a forested area, how much that mitigates from water, a regular kind of grassed suburban lawn, kind of on down from there, just so folks can kind of
right.
And the impact or the benefit of trees in forested areas, please.
Right. So it's Michael Hunt's statistic, but it is that when you have turf grass, about 20% of the water that falls on turf grass is stormwater. It won't sink into the ground, it's going to run off. And when you've got a forested area, that runoff reduces to about 5% of the water that falls in that area. So clearly, we could reduce your runoff by maybe 15% with a bunch of trees in there. So
always love to speak for the benefit of trees, whether on the golf course, internal to the parks, and within the neighborhood. So Nichol, can you share your website and just some of the educational resources that community members can avail themselves of, and
sure.
how, if this neighborhood wanted to participate? Obviously, neighbors, you've got a great resource and asset in Ms. Noni Nielsen, who resides, hopefully, Noni, I'm not oversharing, at the corner of Brookfield and Nichol, the chair of the board of the Nashville Tree Foundation, which is a very important partner, a long time and partner in planting trees in our city. So I look forward to some more opportunities in our neighborhood and the parks to be planting some trees. Can you just share kind of site and a little bit more about that?
Sure. Well, our website is cumberlandrivercompact.org. We have partnered with the city and the tree campaign called Root Nashville, and we are the operational partner in that. The Nashville Tree Foundation is a really strong partner as well, and so that the campaign is fortunate to be on the verge of getting city support for tree canopy to plant trees on private property. So if you all have more space for trees, or if you have new space created by ash trees that are coming down, Root Nashville can work with you to plant new trees on private property. So, and that you can reach Root Nashville either through the Cumberland River Compact.org or through rootnashville.org. It all different addresses that come to the same recipients.
Neighbors, and if you do, plant trees individually, they do have a website. So if you get them in the ground, you can register those towards the kind of the overarching goal by 2050 of planting how many trees?
500,000 trees, and that's a number that was arrived at in order to sustain healthy air, water, people.
And so, yeah, so it is tree planting season, neighbors. So I often share a tree sale platform from the Nashville Tree Task Force, which is another partner. They will deliver you a pretty sizable tree, put it in the ground for you, and give you a tree diaper to keep it moist through the years. So please look on my social media and newsletters and so forth, and consider that this winter. Their next order period, I think, ends November 29th for delivery in mid-December. So that's a nice gift to yourself or friends, the planting of a tree. So, okay, I appreciate you so much, Ms. Houghton, being here. Neighbors, thank you. We're moving into our question and answer. I appreciate your patience. We are running a little bit behind schedule, given some of the technical difficulties at the start. I am keenly aware that a lot of the questions that you were hoping to be answered, whether it is in the capital project space or just generally the assessment of our particular watershed and kind of what is in progress and would have the best collective impact, has not been addressed this evening through the presentation. And so I am not seeing, Ms. Hayes, any questions in the chat at this juncture, but I would welcome neighbors to type those in, and you providing your street address is just helpful to us to understand, are you on Page, are you on Nichol, kind of which end of Nichol are you? If somebody doesn't mind maybe just doing a demo question so we can just see if the chat function is working. I am not seeing anything.
There is one statement in there.
Okay. See Mr. Patterson's test. Okie dokes. Well, I guess in the interest of time and just to make this kind of easier for neighbors, I think I do have some questions that were emailed to me by some folks who were not able. Let's see, I believe Ms. Hayes, do you see a question from Ms.?
There's one that it says that, can you tell us more about the plans for renovating the Warner Parks golf course, including timing?
Timing. I'm happy to answer that question. Ms. Houghton shared that she had spoken with Ms. Hannon and Parks, and I appreciate that so much because I want them to be hearing from folks other than me. I likewise have spoken with Ms. Hannon, with the mayor's office, with the Parks Department, with the Golf Foundation, which is a partner on that renovation. I believe we're looking at proceeding with that. Last I spoke to the mayor's office, there's a little bit more kind of fundraising that needs to happen. So I would anticipate that being plans and so forth in mid part of next year. Ms. Houghton, does that kind of align with the most recent conversation that you've had? That they would be, there were some initial plans and then they kind of took another approach at it. So I know that they have rendered some plans previously, but I think they're thinking of it a little bit differently. Did Ms. Hannon give you a timeline, Ms. Houghton, when you spoke with her?
She didn't. She said they were meeting out there tomorrow to look at the kind of tree buffer and placement, but she's also said that she would begin to include us on kind of that partner planning initiative. So, you know, I'm sure you're in touch with them, and I'll become more involved and bring kind of stormwater concerns to the table.
Okay, so I am getting several texts from neighbors, and Ms. Hayes, if you could sort of look, so I think at present, because we see Mr. Patterson's test comment, but Mr. Patterson is a panelist. I think what is happening is we are not able to see the questions that have been entered by attendees or community members.
I have a couple here that on down. If sediment has built up inside the culvert, how does a homeowner get that cleaned out?
Mr. Swift, can you answer? The question from a neighbor is, if sediment is built up in a culvert, how does someone go about getting that cleaned out? That's not your number, but I would assume that's a 311 or a hub.nashville.gov with the address, correct?
Yeah, you can go to the hub, or you can call us directly, 615-862-4600, option 3. So either one of those 3, and we'll come out and we'll flush those pipes out with our crews. Yeah.
Okay. Ms. Hayes, can you make it so that the attendees can see the chat, please? I myself cannot see the chat. I believe it's only, and I'm a co-host, so I'm not sure. Just from an accountability standpoint, I did want community members to be able to see the questions. I think too, I want to, just for simplicity's sake here, if we're having a little issue with our chat function, Mr. Edwards has raised his hand, and so Mr. Edwards, you are recognized if you would like to unmute and just ask your questions, please. Ms. Hayes, can you unlock Mr. Edwards so that he has the ability? He has raised his hand. I know he has several questions.
Mr. Edwards?
William Edwards. Yes, he has the raised hand function presently. So until we get the chat visibility figured out.
Can you see the 3 dots on the bottom right hand of your screen? If you click on that, it says Q&A, and I think that's how you see the participants' questions.
Yeah, they've populated. So I've seen.
Okay, they have populated in. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, all righty then. Okay.
The second one, why won't deepening small creeks help?
Metro Stormwater, can you speak to changing the depth of creeks and so forth?
Okay. Hey, so a lot of people ask that, especially after we have large events. A lot of people say, hey, if you can just make the creek deeper, you know, we would not have experienced the flooding we experienced. So for one, creeks normally run fairly flat. Let's say you want to take a creek and deepen it by 5 feet, okay? So you start at one point, you dig down 5 feet. Well, you just can't dig down 5 feet and stop. You have to dig down 5 feet and then continue it until it actually daylights or drains down into the next larger body of water. So literally, you went out and made a creek 5 feet deeper. You could potentially have to make it 5 feet deeper and run that for miles and miles and miles and miles before you tie into the next body of water. Let's say it's the Cumberland, and let's say at the point you tie in at, you're 5 feet below the Cumberland's bottom. So then you got to make the Cumberland lower. So on the surface, it's logical, makes sense. Hey, if it's deeper, it can handle more water. but then it really is just at some point, you're just basically digging a hole, and to actually make it work where, okay, just make it 5 feet, just make it deeper, you're just going to have to run that for miles and miles and miles and spend millions upon millions of dollars. And then the funny thing about nature and rainfall is that there's always a larger rain event. So let's say you did go through the process of making it 5 feet deeper and you ran it miles and tied into the next larger body of water. You know, there's always a rain event whereby you're going to see some flooding. So, you know, and that's the long-winded version of why. Now, if you could just dig down 5 feet, run it down 100 yards and say, okay, this is going to start flooding. But basically, all you just did, you just basically built a pool right there for that stretch. And ultimately,
yeah, and I think just generally, it's not best practice. I know, you know, as you look at the creek behind your home or in front of your home, it doesn't look much like a creek anymore. I know many years ago when the last kind of 2-on-1 build happened adjacent to Bellbrook, I remember being very kind of delighted to go into the backyard and see, you know, what the creek must have looked like way back when. You know, this creek has been extremely, you know, channelized and diverted over time through private property development. But that said, it's still not best practice to get in what was a natural creek bed. You know, back in the day, you know, the city was putting sewer pipes down creek beds, which also wasn't a good thing to do. Okay, thanks for everybody's patience. I can now see all the comments in the chat. And so, Mr. Edwards and Ms. Anderson, I do see your hands raised, but if I may, I'm just going to start kind of through the questions. If I see that they've already been answered, respectfully, I'm not going to repose them, but if it's something that has not been elevated yet or addressed, I did want to speak to that. So here I am seeing a question from Mr. Garrity. They have been, meaning Metro, reshaping ditches too far down on Nichol, which is not addressing the flooding issues. Water coming from the park and Page needs to be redirected. So I guess that is in some ways a two-part question. Mr. Swift, I had asked, but I don't know if someone else on staff can speak to, you know, the service request or the work that was done in the ditches along Nichol was on what people perceive to be, again, the Bellmead side, but closer to West Tyne in the Brookfield vicinity. Obviously, at a certain point after Canterbury, there's not any ditches there. Can you speak to any work that might be done along in the ditchways, kind of in the aggregate, and then as well what this is looking at and talking about and was not addressed here this evening, as I had asked that it would be the you know, the potential capital improvement of piping stormwater.
Right. If it's just a matter of us coming out and taking a look, and we can, of course, we can send our guys out to take a look at these different sections. If it's ditches that need to be redefined, driveway pipes need to be cleaned out or replaced, we can do that. We do sometimes run into the whole deal of within the right-of-way gets kind of tricky sometimes, especially on borders between us and satellite cities, and that get a little bit confused about who has what. But ultimately, if it's a section that we need to come out and take a look at to evaluate, we can do that. You can give us a call, or you can just give me your information, and I can have one of my investigators come out and take a look. If it's something that we can do, we'll knock it out. If it falls within another satellite city, we'll refer it over to them.
Okay, and let's see,
So lady, this is Sonia Allman. If I may, I'm looking at a lot of the questions, and a lot of the questions are talking about an overall, and I know you've mentioned it a couple times, you know, stormwater capital plan for the Page Road area. And I think that's something that's a much larger conversation that needs to be It needs to be had with multiple metro agencies. You know, that road is a narrow
Oh,
road.
Ms.
There's lots of
Allman,
trees.
right, Ms. Allman,
And I think,
I'm well
go
aware
ahead,
of
I'm
that.
sorry.
Yeah, I think I'm well aware of that, as our neighbors, and, you know, I have been out in that road and in meetings, and we've talked about it, and, you know, the sidewalk aspect and so on and so forth. But I feel like we're doing a little bit of this, like, you know, talk to Public Works, talk to Water. So I don't dispute that that is a departmental endeavor. But I know that there were proposals in 2019 that had a variety of routes. And as I've shared with staff, these neighbors had an expectation that that would be shared at this meeting. I understand if that's, you know, so I don't know, Mr. Tays, you're on the call. I don't know if you can kind of speak to that, because I think that you can see the trend in the questions about that. And so can somebody please speak to that?
Hey, this is Rick
Yeah,
Swift.
so-
Yeah. Excuse me. Hello?
Go ahead, Rick.
Okay. Hey, so ultimately what was done was we did take a look at several different options of things that could be done, just schematics, and it was, as Sonia, as Jen's about to speak about, something we'll have to include other agencies, so it's not just a simple stormwater project. But yeah, there were several different things looked at. Again, just in concept, not final plans. You know, I believe when we did look at it, it did involve other departments, and I believe it was the issue of funding and all of that kind of came into play, and it just kind of went to the wayside, more or less.
Okay, well, I guess what I would ask then, whether that's Mr. Tays or somebody who is a stormwater engineer, as I said in our 2 planning meetings that we had for this call to make sure that it addressed all of neighbors' questions and concerns, was, you know, folks want to understand from whence the water is coming. Obviously, planting more trees is a good thing. Nobody's opposed to that. We're going to work to do that to the extent that we can on our municipal sites. And we also encourage neighbors to do the same. From a maintenance perspective, we are going to, you know, reform ditches and make sure water is flowing and everything is clear. But I think what folks want to understand is the schematic proposal for piping the water and taking it down, as I recall, you know, the center of the road of Nichol Ln. Is that, you know, I know it goes to feasibility as far as the area of the right of way, the trees, could there be sidewalks, et cetera. But to what extent, I mean, respectfully, you know, Metro Stormwater came to me in, you know, whether 2019 or no, I guess that was actually when I was first in office, and said, hey, here's a proposal. And so, you know, I assume that was in response to the 2010 flood. So can somebody just speak in a general sense about a capital solution, and would that, you know, what would that be? I'm not saying we have to commit to do that, but to what extent would that mitigate the stormwater concerns of the neighborhood? I asked Metro Water to please, with intention, look at this watershed, look at the service requests, look at the concerns of the community that were compiled, and to, you know, speak about infill development, private property mitigation, and also capital improvement. And as you can see from the chat, you know, neighbors are rightly and understandably frustrated that we've kind of done a general presentation here and some of the kind of single property stuff that they don't frankly need to come to this meeting for. They could read that stuff in my newsletter. So, you know, I think the maps have been very interesting for folks to see the watershed. So I'm looking for some technical commentary, please, particular to solutions in this area that talk about the volume of water, also to just, you know, the volume of these rain events and how the larger context, you know, this is something that all neighborhoods are struggling with. So if somebody could please speak to that from the perspective of a stormwater engineer, with some knowledge of this area, which I understand Mr. Tays has, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, this is Matt. So, Michael, I don't know if whoever is controlling the PowerPoint, if they could go back to the earlier in the presentation where it shows all the drainage basins. I don't know if that's possible or not, but I guess basically just to go back and kind of everybody kind of brief history. What we initially looked at years ago was specifically at the address of 415 Page Road. There's a significant amount of water that comes right there at that location between the Jordan DeBell subdivision and 415 Page Road. And at that point there, the road in high rain events will overtop. And so what we did was we looked at several different options. And one of them was, we could pipe it all the way down Page Road and take it down to Brookfield. You could go down Brookfield and then turn it down Nichol Ln and then just take it all the way down to the creek. One of the other options was just to pipe it all the way down Page Road, down to Tyne, and then let it tie into the creek. The other option was to cut across a couple of properties over to Nichol and then take it all the way down Nichol Ln, which in that case you would have to get a couple of easements. But just in general, those were kind of the options we were looking at. And of course, looking at those type of options, it would be a significant amount of funding that we would have to do, and also coordination with NDOT and so other utilities, because, if we took anything down Page Road, it would be pretty disruptive. We'd have to relocate utilities and so forth. So those are some of the kind of the challenges with looking at those options.
Understood.
But we did.
Mr. Tays, can you speak to, just for so neighbors can understand, you mentioned Jardin de Bell, now known as the Bell Park subdivision, and folks can see that kind of as a rectangle somewhat at the center of this illustration. So there's, water coming down there, overtopping. What you were saying is one among the proposals would be to take a stormwater pipe down Page Road, turn on Brookfield, and take that stormwater pipe down Nichol Ln. Can you help neighbors understand proportionally the amount of water that is coming, kind of, the watersheds within the watershed, so to speak? Can you speak to percentages, like how much of the water that kind of falls out into Richland Creek or is running down the creek in front of and behind homeowners on Nichol Ln and Page, how much of that is coming out of the park and how much of that is coming on the path along Page that you mentioned, please?
Yeah, so as far as percentages, I won't be able to give you any percentage off the top of my head. We can get those to you, but you can see in this exhibit here, the Jordan de Bell is right there in the center. You can see it's a rectangular area, and the blue areas are detention areas to give you some point of reference on the park. So they've got 2 ponds over there, and you can see the area G is a large part of the park that is routed ultimately down Page Road. It's about 127 acres, and you see area A up at the top, it's 23 acres. So each one of these sub areas ultimately drains down to Page Road, and you can see I had a pointer easier, but I don't think this one has the arrow. But each sub area drains to the next sub area.
Mr. Hunt, is it possible when you shared, thank you, to Zoom? Thank you. And if you could get that back to full screen, please, that would be helpful. That's what neighbors are wanting to see and look at and talk about. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So for instance, like that there at the top at A, you see that number 1, that shows that area there flows to that little small detention area on the park. And then from that point, it drains to area B. And then, of course, B drains down to the Jordan DeVale Pond and is routed, we're not to the pond, but through that subdivision. And then ultimately down to, there's another pond on the Jordan DeVale, which is, that detention pond is specifically just for that subdivision. So all that water from the park is actually routed through that subdivision, and it comes down on the outside and ties into the stormwater infrastructure on Page Road. So the people on Page Road and Nichol Lane specifically are in section H. If you want to scroll to the top, you'll see subdivision. No, go other direction. Yeah, right there. So subcatchment H there is mainly those folks that are on Page Road and Nichol Lane at the upstream end of it. And you can see there on the flow lines, that area there all drains to a culvert underneath Brookfield, where that number 7 is. And so this kind of gives you an idea of how everything's kind of routed through the neighborhood. The blue line there is also the channel that routes, behind people's, houses and through their front yards. And so that, I'm sure, is part of the issue where, folks are seeing in large rain events, that area, reaching capacity. But you can see upstream, a large part of that comes from the park. And so if the park is doing improvements, there might be some opportunity there to get with them and do some further detention on their park, possibly. I don't know, but I also don't want to speak for parks. But there might be some opportunity there to reduce, the water that's being routed through that area.
Mr. Tays, Jeffrey Thomas had the question, what role does runoff from hard surface areas of Cheekwood, the golf course, Warner Parks play in contributing to the flooding problems we've been experiencing? Doesn't that far outweigh the individual, the relatively minor runoffs? Well, what I would say is Cheekwood has not increased its impervious surface, and the parking lot built at the golf course clubhouse is pervious, very specifically. So, I would say, Mr. Tays, I mean, I don't know, I had hoped to have kind of this level of analysis, but we're adding roofs. I guess occasionally when we do, 2-on-1s, we are losing trees, and neighbors, we will lose many more trees in our neighborhood because of the emerald ash borer pandemic. So I encourage you, if you have a mature ash tree, to treat that and save it. But we've not really added through development in this vicinity at Cheekwood or the golf course or the park more impervious surface. I mean, the roads in the park have been the roads in the park for a very long time.
Yes, and that's correct. Yeah, and any kind of development that the parks does, of course, they have to meet the regs just like everybody else, and they would have to show that they're not sending additional runoff off their property if they do any kind of future development.
Okay. All right. Going through from Mr. Edwards in Bellbrook Circle. He is pointing to, again, a collective stormwater drainage system issue rather than individual homeowner issues. I'm sorry, I'm just struggling with this chat function a little bit. I keep losing people. How can we an entire stormwater drainage system request for this area? So I guess, colleagues, or it stormwater are aware, I have sidewalks for Page Road in the capital improvements budget. Sidewalk projects or stormwater projects are sometimes sidewalk projects. And so what I will say is I, as a council member, can kind of see and understand that water sewer projects, so not stormwater, it's pretty clear to me, you know, this many breaks in the line, this age of the line, the failure, how those move up the hierarchy of, you know, kind of objectively being targeted for a capital improvement, right? So I think we as council members can understand that. I think we understand less well how stormwater capital improvements are kind of chosen and advanced. So I share with neighbors often, Metro Stormwater, that, you know, their stormwater fee is being put to good work in our small scale projects. We are seeing more culvert improvements, ditch line stuff, and I get a report from water every Friday, and I know that those small projects are happening in my district, and they are important. But I am less confident or understanding in, you know, how do we kind of come to a determination that if this is the right solution for this neighborhood. I know how to advance anything in the public works domain. I know how that gets listed. I know how it objectively gets elevated. I know that on the water sewer side. I do not know that on the stormwater side. So can somebody speak to, just in a general sense, how we elevate a stormwater improvement and how that works in the larger nexus of everything that is needed? How does the stormwater department prioritize its investments, please?
Okay, this is Rick Swift, Stormwater. Hey,
And you can speak up, Mr. Swift. I can barely hear you.
Okay. All right, is that better?
That is better, yes.
All right, good deal. All right, so very simply, the more damage, the more harm, the more severe the problems are, the more houses that flood, the more times roads are flooded out and washed out, the more severe the problem, then the more critical it is for us to get out there. So if it's an issue of where when it rains, people cannot leave their houses because their yards are completely flooded, they can't get to their cars, or it rains and the roads are completely flooded out and it's nowhere near a floodplain. Those are things, and we do have those scattered across the county. Those are the ones that make their way up to the top and that receive that higher, and it kind of makes sense. You know, they're your more severe problems. So those are the ones that kind of rise up to the top. We may plan to do a certain amount of projects within a certain time frame, and then all of a sudden there's a sinkhole that happens. You know, we have to address that. So it is based on severity. Just how bad is it? How many properties are being impacted? Just pure severity. The worse it is, the more property damage, the more impact to infrastructure, the more the road floods. Those are the ones that make it up and get that attention.
Okay, I appreciate that. Is there kind of an objective, publicly available, accountable list of that, or does that align with the legislation that council has passed asking for the same? Is there a publicly accountable list of how those are prioritized?
Yeah, that's part of what the council receives every year of our projected projects. Yeah.
Okay, projected projects. And so is this project on the list, or as Mr. Tay said, it's just in schematic? So I know how to put something on the CIB. But
yeah, so, you know, so it's been said there that what happened here in this area, what we have are some schematics, not plans. This is schematics where I kind of run through some ideas of what can be done. Of course, these involve other departments, as we said. So, yeah, and then, of course, you know, now the more people that are experiencing flooding, the more people that when rain occurs and you can't drive down the street, the road is flooded out, water surrounding your house, we need to know those things. And the more those things get reported, And the more we see pictures and we have evidence of that, those are the things that really get things triggered.
So neighbors, what I would say to you in that regard, I've got something from a neighbor here named Paul. I'm not sure his exact location, but it said, we have done all the mitigation and maintenance recommendations. The creek flooded our entire backyard within minutes. We have small children, and this could have been catastrophic. Our concerns were shrugged off by Metro Stormwater. This is a safety issue. We are not seeing the urgency. What is the, yeah. So, so neighbors, what I would say is, you know, make sure when you have an event like that, that it's absolutely, that it is registered. I would ask neighbors on Page Road. I think sometimes, you know, the road floods and it's like, well, this happens all the time. And so we don't necessarily register it, but it pretty much happens at every major rain event. One would think that once that's kind of registered, it doesn't have to be reported again, but I would encourage neighbors to continue to report and submit that to 311 from a data perspective. And you know, I'm going to speak with Stormwater again and see what we can do to get a more detailed assessment of a potential capital improvement, what that cost would be, what that would look like, and where that would fit among the priorities in the larger city. So I will make that commitment to neighbors.
Thank you, Council Lady.
Subsequent this
Hey,
meeting.
hey, one other thing that the residents
Yes.
can do. We have crews that work, they're out 24/7. So when there are large rain events, please call in. You look out, the roads flooded, 862-4600, call in. Our guys will come out. That's another good way to get these things documented. The more those events take place, the more issues we have, the more we're responding out there. All those things kind of help, you know. So I just want to throw that out there. You look out and the road's flooded, call 862-4600. There may be a blockage somewhere. Our guys will come out there at 1, 2 o'clock in the morning and try to get things unblocked. So please, you see these events take place, call in, you know. As the council lady was saying, you may think, okay, this happens all the time. Still call in, and that would be a huge help as well.
Mr. Tays, and we're gonna wrap it up here, folks, because we've gotten to 7:30, but I'm just trying to make sure I get all the way through the chat. Ms. Anderson had inquired when Mr. Tays was looking at the, speaking to the map about the water from above the number 7 area. Does all that water then get pushed down to the lower portion of Nichol Lane? It seems that those people on the bottom portion of Nichol Lane collect all of it. The Nichol Lane addresses by Bell Brook receive it all and then can't go through the small opening created at the Bell Brook. I guess the walls and the pass through there particular to Bell Brook Circle. So is all the water from this whole watershed draining all the way back down to Bell Brook and going out that way? I mean, I guess there's some stuff on ditch lines along the road, but is that an accurate assessment?
Yes, yes, that is. I mean, you can see the number 8, and I can get whoever wants this exhibit to them, just if they, you know, want to email me or call me. But that number 8 there, yes. So everything from watershed H flows to watershed I. And so yeah, you do have basically all that area that's routed, unfortunately, through that area. And again, that's part of the challenges is, you know, there's a lot of structures and walls and, you know, pedestrian bridges possibly that, you know, go over that channel, and and, you know, things like that are kind of what are the challenges that we face as far as, you know, how we address these projects and kind of what will be involved and who will be impacted and so forth.
Appreciate that. I did want to pose, because we were, I appreciate that we have the city of Mead here. And so, you know, my ability to make sure we're accountable and get all these questions answered on the Metro side, I can certainly make sure that'll happen. I know Mr. Patterson will want to do the same. There's a question here from Ms. Taylor. And Mr. Patterson, she asked, can you speak about the water from Canterbury that has been newly diverted to Nichol and causing the street and property flooding?
Angie, this is Beth Reardon. Mr. Patterson has already left, but we'd be happy to address this at another time.
Okay, I appreciate
He's not here
that.
tonight, so
Ms.
certainly
Ms.
she can
Reardon,
email one of us, either me or Mr. Patterson,
Ms.
about
Taylor, what
that.
I will do, Ms. Reardon, I will respond to there's an email from Ms. Taylor in my inbox. I will just
Okay.
respond to that and CCN you and Mr. Patterson, okay?
Perfect.
Ms.
Thank
Taylor?
you so much.
Let's see. So 1103A Nichol Lane has shared a video. Thank you. Okay. Mr. Edwards is asking, how do we document the flood events in Railbrook Circle? There have been 3 since he has lived there in 3 years. Where are these submitted? He has multiple pictures. And so I guess I'm kind of hearing 2 things, Mr. Tays and Mr. Swift, and is that, you know, from a data standpoint, just, you know, we want to make sure that these are registered in hub.nashville.gov. But I think neighbors also want to feel that those don't go into a black hole. And if we have kind of an established collective problem, I mean, are we going to, you know, what's the best way when there's kind of a concerted area of concern like this? Where should those videos and so forth be going in the most helpful way?
Hey, if you have videos and things like that you'd like to get to us, I'm going to give you my email address, and you can send them to me directly. And that is ricky.swift@nashville.gov, RICKY.Swift, SWIFT, @nashville.gov.
And neighbors, if you would always please make sure to CC me, Angie.Henderson@nashville.gov, and that way I can make sure that gets kind of followed up. Okie dokes. Okay, that's also, again, speaking to the Belle Mead concern, which we'll address subsequent to that. Okay, I believe that gets through all the questions. Neighbors, I appreciate your patience with some of our technical difficulties. I appreciate staff's presence here today, and that I know we all went a little long. And also, neighbors, I want to acknowledge your, you know, some of your frustration as well. But I think we finally got to the information that we needed as we got to the end of the meeting. And so I have some work to do as far as the capital side of things, and getting some follow up on that. I will make sure to compile all these questions that were in the chat, and we'll have a email to go out in the coming days that summarize the findings of the meetings, and we'll also have a link to the meeting in that. With that, thank you everyone for being here, and we appreciate your time very much, and I hear your concerns, and I will continue to work for you with the department to make sure that they get addressed. So thank you, everyone.